In the context of climate change, we are struggling as a global community to do precisely that. Create the conditions in terms of political and economic signals that will allow 6.5 billion people to increasingly move towards a different direction in terms of the future of our economies. Because climate change is not an isolated phenomenon. Climate change is not just about a gas or 6 gases, greenhouse gases. It is about rethinking through the realization of how the power of human activity has begun to affect the future of this planet, how to change the way our economies work, as economies domestically and as a global economy that trades and interacts with each other on an unprecedented level today. What is also at stake is, as President Nasheed demonstrated so often in Copenhagen, it's not just an economic choice. It's not whether you go and buy one hamburger or another, or you buy one television company's products or another. In some parts of the world, this is going to be about the very essence of survival of nations and their cultures. And as President Jagdeo demonstrated also, it is about the future of an economy such as Guyana's. Are we as a global community going to find the instruments and the resources to make the choice that was very much the choice of the 20th century? Use up nature, mine your natural resource base to make a leap in terms of development. Are we going to find a more intelligent way of working as a global economy and as a community of nations to enable Guyana one day to be the custodians of one of the most significant tropical rainforests on this planet? Are we going to enable him as a president to stand before his own people and not have to say, I traded your right to development away for some higher ideal that 90% of the rest of the world was not willing to either assist us with or be a part to? This is the debate we are having in the context of climate change, and therefore I often appeal to leaders and also to business and to the public as we negotiate post-Copenhagen towards Cancun in the search of an answer to the climate change challenge of our time. Do not reduce this to a simple question of carbon dioxide. Climate change is our greatest opportunity, unprecedented but also, in a sense, daunting, to make a paradigm shift in the way we understand development for the coming century. And therefore, as countries prepare to move towards Cancun, we have to ensure that the concept of the green economy, or whatever you wish to call it, is part of an understanding that that is what we are talking about. It is not about constraining development. It is about broadening the opportunities in order to have development take place in the coming decades. And this is also true when we look at what is this year's theme of the United Nations in terms of the International Year of Biodiversity. The silent and invisible crisis of biodiversity and the loss of ecosystems is as dramatic in due course and will be recognized as such as the threat of climate change. We cannot continue to take decade by decade to address one problem after another. And this is where you, as business leaders, as investors, as financial markets, as entrepreneurs, as people who have patents in your drawers that sometimes have been there for 20 years because in your reading the market was not ready, you need to be leaders and pioneers. We spent 2 decades arguing, whether we call it the Washington Consensus or Milton Friedman's school, about the role of government. The notion, the less government, the more market, in a sense, paralyzed us for 2 decades. We know today, and we know it in particular in countries like Korea, that governments and the market, and therefore the private sector, need to find more intelligent ways of interacting. Legislation is not about constraining business, and even though we have had over the last 20 to 30 years the challenge that environmental legislation was often legislation about the past, trying to deal with problems that we had created, what we are seeing today, and including in the green growth legislation that you have here in Korea, is that we are beginning to legislate about the future. And this is not about some command and control economy. It is about realizing that the scale and pace of change that we require to make the transitions that are possible and also essential cannot happen on the back of the market alone. You as entrepreneurs know that if there is a level playing field and if there is certainty and that the standards are raised, then you can make almost miracles happen. but the role of government and of society in shaping the marketplace is as important as the role of the entrepreneur and the investor in making, first of all, those possibilities a reality. This is, no more and no less, one of the key themes when we talk about the green economy, and therefore the theme of this Business for the Environment Summit this year here in Korea. Your Excellency, once again, thank you for welcoming us here in Korea. Thank you also to the business community in Korea, which has been so actively involved in preparing for this summit. And thank you to all of you as guests and contributors to this conference for sending a signal out of Seoul that the debate about the green economy will not wane over the coming months. On the contrary, it is more urgent than ever. And as you will convene the G20 here in Seoul later this year, we entrust, in a sense, upon you also, Your Excellency, the continued leadership that will allow the G20 not to play the alternative global governance mechanism, but to be the group of leaders and pioneers who lead by example. Thank you.